Okay, podcast episode number 8. We're delighted to be joined by Dr. Paul Wood. Nice to see you, pal.
Yeah, you too.
Excellent. We were just saying with Paul Hurrying, one of the benefits of the PGA show for us is we get to be face to face with guys like yourself that are, several thousand miles away, and we'll interact a few times through the year through the various mediums and social and that sort of stuff. But it's better to be face to face. So we're delighted to see you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
You got a real British theme today then with me and Paul.
I know. we really have done. We really have done. Trying to get all the good guys on there.
There you go.
So tell us a little bit about kind of Ping in 2020. What's sort of going on?
Well, I mean, obviously this is the show, so we're launching spring product. We've got a couple of things. It's a relatively light launch season for us.
Yep.
Our big G launches are not every 12 months. We try to stretch them out a bit. So G410 still the main event at the moment. And that's just for us. And if I could have my way, we'd launch stuff even less often. I'd love to just be able to go away, work on it for a few years, and then come out with it. But the reality is, every now and again, at least, we have to bring out a product. And so we've got irons and putters today, but we're really focusing on, once we get back home, it'll be really focusing on next year and beyond, or at least later this year. So I go with my role because I kind of oversee the various different departments. I have to switch between looking at innovation projects that are sort of 2, 3, 4 years, and then you start making decisions on design projects that are maybe 12 months out, and then you're looking at, well, hey, the stuff that's going to be coming out in the summer. So you keep switching hats, and then so for this week it's very much spring 2020, and the day I get home it'll be what's next, where are we going? So
very cool. So G710 on the irons, so a slightly different take on the distance iron with loft coming down. There's a technology in the face. We had some time with Marty sort of talking about that.
Yeah, our big thing is making sure we get the height and we get the stopping power, and we'll use whatever loft can get us there. So the 710, and we had it on the 700 too. We kind of, in the whole design of the club, you're getting more flex in the face, which just gives you flat out ball speed, but then how the club flexes can give you more launch angle for a given loft. And so this is an iron where we try to really maximize that. We call it kind of the diving board effect. Of you get, as the club face flexes, it's flexing, but it's also kind of flexing back and rocking open. So with a lower static loft, you can still get the launch angle and get the height. And that's what we really care about, is like, what do you see on the course? Is the ball within reason? You want it to go as long as you can, but you've got to be able to stop it. Trying to get that balance, right? It's all trade-offs of more ball speed, more height, enough stopping power, and then really working on the looks. People want to look at a player's looking iron, but they want the performance of a super game improvement iron. So that's the ideal thing, is to get both in the same package.
So true.
That's the main thing we noticed at the show, and seeing it a few months back of G710. You look down at it and you go, just from the color change, it looks so much better. It looks more like something that anyone can use, but the forgiveness that you have out of it is massive. Yeah,
exactly. In some ways, you're trying to hide how forgiving an iron it is. You're making it look as clean as you can. The black, obviously it looks really sharp, but the black actually helps it look smaller.
We really saw that. I think Brandon actually said to us, he's like, is that smaller than the one we have in our demo drawer?
And it's not, it's the same size. You put them down next to each other and you can logically see they're the same size, but then visually you go, it's smaller. So that's what we're going for. Look a little slimmer, look a little smaller. We do some stuff with the top rail to try to make it look smaller, but you want to put mass up there. So you're trying to balance, that side of it. So it's a lot. It's kind of playing with the golfer's psychology, playing into the golfer's psychology.
When you hear golfers and they sort of they're a little bit reluctant with the loft, sort of the decrease in loft and irons, and you hear that sort of thing, and obviously I think all of our job is messaging when it comes to storytelling, when it comes to, we're trying to help. We're not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. We're not trying to create distance for the sake of distance. At that trajectory, sacrificing performance, there's a real story behind the catapult effect from the face and the contribution from the technology.
And so our view is try to keep it as simple as we can in terms of giving people options, but not making it overwhelmingly complicated. So we have a power spec that's there if you really want to or need to in the fitting, launch it a little lower. Because some players no matter what loft of a 7-iron you give them, they could do with bringing the ball flight down. So for that player, going stronger in loft helps.
It's huge.
Equally, there's plenty of players out there that don't launch it high enough.
Yeah.
We have on the opposite end, retrospec. If you can up the lofts a couple, and my dad's a great example. He's not super high swing speed, but he's very low ball flight. You give him a bit more launch, he hits it further. So it's just a fitting variable.
Right.
There's no magic about loft. There's no magic about a 7-iron being 33 degrees or 31 degrees or 30 degrees. It's just looking at the whole set. I know you guys do a great job of that. You're not just buying a 7-iron, you're buying the whole set. So make sure what you buy works for a 7-iron, but it also works in your 5-iron, and it also works in your wedge, and you don't suddenly have a 30-yard gap from your wedge to your sandwich or whatever.
It's part of the challenge, I think, now of set composition when we get players in, is we may go out a certain direction with an iron, say, but either side of that irons with the wedges in their hybrids and woods they're not in alignment with what we're trying to do or what is best for that customer, but we only have the opportunity. They've only came for an iron fit, so it can sometimes be tricky trying to kind of make that blend and not be a disruption to the whole
tie
thing.
It into the set, right? I'd say probably the only two clubs in the bag that you really fit independently are driver and putter. Everything else is part of this set makeup, and it's got to fit in with the rest of the set.
Exactly.
It's something our fitters would do too. If we're fitting someone for a set of irons, and we know that their consistency with a 6-iron, what we fit off isn't as high as we'd want it, we would run into a 5 hybrid or 6 hybrid or whatever it may be, and then we can build a set that matches their hybrids to give them the best gapping as much as possible.
It's hard though, because it's a more complicated story and a more complicated conversation to have, and I think a lot of players aren't necessarily thinking that way, so you have to guide them a bit.
Without a doubt.
I think things like Arcos and seeing your data and going, oh look, there is a huge gap in my bag of real shots I'm hitting on real courses will probably help people get their head around that a bit more. That okay, my gapping looks great for my irons and my shots look great with my 3-wood, but I have this huge gap in between and I don't have a club there. And so I'm hoping that'll help players start thinking more about the full set makeup.
One of the things, I think, if someone comes to us and they're maybe unsure where to start with our services, whether it's a driver fit or an iron fit, I like to get them into the bag analysis. Let's look at your overall setup. Let's come in and just do a bag review. We'll get you to hit from top to bottom. Let's just hit it, and then we'll look at it together. We'll see where there's red flags, we'll see what's working and not, and we'll see where the opportunities are. Perhaps there's something we see in the delivery that none of the stuff is really matched up well, or that type of thing. So that's a nice place for, I think, to start, where you can then give them advice. Okay, focus more on that one. There's nothing worse when you see someone come in for the driver fit, they hit their driver pretty good, but you're looking over at the irons going, they're not good, that's not working. So you want to be at least getting them into the right fit.
Agreed.
Arcos is a really good segue. We've started to look at it a little bit more, and the contribution we can make to our clients with regards to not just taking care of them in the transaction and in the kind of fit itself. We want that ongoing relationship where we can continue to analyse their performance, and you guys have just put Arcos on all your iron sets.
So it's available on everything. It's no upcharge on everything. It's actually the default grip now on our G710 is the Arcos embedded. So it's the kind of strongest message we can say that, look, we've baked in this technology at no upcharge for you. What's not to like? And it won't be for everyone. Some people just want to go out on the golf course and be completely untethered, and and that's fine. But there's so much you can learn about your game. And we've always taken the last stage of the fitting is to go and see how it did, right? Go and then, tour players do this as a matter of course every week, right? They get a fitting, they change something, and then did it actually work on the practice range, and then did it translate to the course? And if it didn't, let's course correct, let's change something. So we've always encouraged players to look at it that way. You bought a set of irons, but we built them so we can always tweak them. We can, if the lie angles are not quite right, let us know, we can tweak them.
Nothing's permanent.
Exactly.
We can modify it. I mean, I think the caddy feature will be really interesting for people to almost, with more data and more consistent sort of, or more shots in the system, for the caddy feature to be, giving advice on players, whereas maybe we see players all the time under club and thinking they hit it maybe a fraction further than they do. It will be interesting if people start to see better scores and getting, hitting a few more greens in regulation as a result of the technology.
I think so. I mean, just having having some objective data
Sure.
makes it doesn't necessarily mean that you're always going to make the smartest decisions.
Sure.
I've overridden the caddy plenty of times. Where I'm like, no, I don't care what you say. I know I can get a 7-iron there, and I'm going to prove you wrong. But that's
Like
part of
a
the
challenge.
fun. But if I was playing in a competition, I might be
Yeah.
more inclined to to listen to the caddies. So
That's funny.
it just adds another tool in the toolbox, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that data collection can help us with, again, fitters pull up their customer's profile and they look and go, we just fit you for this driver 6 months ago, and
Yeah.
look at your consistency now from your previous driver, and like you said, let's find your faults and work on those going forward.
Yeah.
I think Arcos is really impressive.
Yeah. I think for us, being able to sort of almost preempt the need for a call or a conversation with a customer, let them know that your fitter, your golf coach, or whoever is using it with a student, we're always watching. We're always analysing. We're making sure you're good, and we can maybe see a problem before they can. Maybe they're looking at, we can see a consistent miss with a specific club, left or right or whatever it may be, not quite separate the yardage gaps, and we can address that with them. And that constant process of adjusting the clubs as they evolve as players is really useful to us.
Right, agreed. I think another really good area is wedges, where actually showing people what do you really use your wedge for the most.
Right.
And we tend to pick a comfortable shot.
Yeah.
And look at wedges by hitting a full swing or a 3/4 swing, off a nice perfect lie, and kind of judging how the wedge is working based on that. But then you look at your Arcos data and say, oh man, I'm like 5 times more likely to be hitting a chip out of the rough than I am hitting a full swing out of the middle of the fairway. Maybe I should be at least guiding my wedge thoughts around how it performs on chip shots and that kind of stuff than full swings. So that stuff can be really helpful. I think.
G410. I think it was kind of widely considered in most of the club fitting shops that I kind of communicate with as the gold standard when it came to wood performance last year, all the way through driver, fairway, hybrid. It was fantastic. What was the sort of reaction in house when you guys got that product and saw the results in the field?
It's been great. I mean, you know how it does in our testing internally, but there's always this somewhat slight unknown of when we launch it out into the field, exactly how it's going to go. Like we know what it does, but and particularly when you've had a big success, G400 was a big success. It's hard to back up a big one, and there's a tendency to want to try to not change too much, keep things the same, and so we had to be pretty brave with G410 to put in some fairly major new technologies and get out of the comfort zone, give people a reason to try it, and it's been really, really good, really heartening. You do, there's always a certain, it's kind of like sort of sending your child off into the big wide world and
It must be,
go earn your fortune, son, and it's great when you start to get that initial feedback and people are reacting to it the way you hope, and it's, all the hard work's paid off. So, but now it gives us a bigger challenge again next time, because we always have to prove the next club is better than the last one. So the better we make them, the harder it is. It's a good challenge to have.
Do you ever get that the sort of butterflies in your tummy when a big product launch is going out there and you're waiting to see how it's received by the world, and you've kind of got that feeling of like, what are they going to say?
Yeah, no, there is, because there's so much stuff you can't control.
Sure.
We control all the things we can control, and trust the process, and that's where having a great team and having a great process and being confident in the testing we do is helpful. But we can't control what everyone else is doing. We can't control the competition. We can't control, some of that early tour feedback, and that can be quite meaningful. So, you just. I know.
It must be at times. It must be a little gut wrenching at times when you see it going out there. Ping has always been known for engineering, never rushing a product into the market. When it came to the adjustable hosel, you waited until there was no trade-offs and sacrifices to the original hosel. Movable weight technology took a little bit longer to get there. Tell us a little bit about that in-house philosophy at Ping and how those conversations go.
Yeah, it very much does come back to this. We have to prove that a product is better before we can launch it. And our most sort of stringent critics are John Solheim and John K. Solheim, who both have engineering backgrounds. John has been making golf clubs for 61 years now. He knows a few things about, about golf club technology, and is very passionate about the details of the engineering.
Yeah.
And John Kay exactly the same. He's got an engineering degree. He's worked in golf all his life.
Yeah.
He knows an absolute ton about it. And we sit down every week with the two of them and my whole team and go over everything about the designs. And the mantra is, you can put whatever new feature you want in as long as you can prove there's no backward step anywhere.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the hosel.
Sure.
That was, we can do adjustable hosels as soon as we like, as long as you can prove there's no aerodynamic cost, which is challenging on a hosel.
For sure.
And there's no weight cost. We're not giving up performance or forgiveness or anything like that. And same with the adjustable weight. So it's not like we didn't just suddenly decide last year, you know what, I think it'd be a really good idea to give players the ability to adjust left right ball flight, right? Obviously we've known that forever, but it was the no sacrifice piece. Can we do it in a way where our moment of inertia of the driver is still the highest in the industry? Can we do it in a way where center of mass is not affected? Because you build a weight channel and you're putting weight, you're tying up weight in the club somewhere you could have been using it somewhere else. So you see on the G410 driver, it's way in the back. That was a bigger engineering challenge. It's a really awkward place to try to put a channel.
Yeah.
But it means that you're adding weight where we were going to be adding weight anyway.
Right.
And so it was no sacrifice is a phrase we use a lot.
Yeah.
No backward steps.
Yeah.
And so it takes a little longer, but if you can do it, then there's no downsides, because there's no point making one thing better only to make something else worse. And what have you really gained? You kind of shuffling around features. We want to always be trying to add features without taking a backward step.
And with the massive R&D team, then you have your tour guys. They put a ton of input in when designing new product.
You know, probably less than you'd think. We do care what our tour players think quite deeply, and we use them, I'd say, to try to understand what are they looking to do. You know, what are the shots they want to hit that they can't hit quite as well as they would like to be. What you don't do is ask them, well, hey, what's the club you would like us to design? Because they're not club designers and that's not their job. The ideal relationship with the tour players, you tell us about your game and what you want, and then we'll try to figure out how to deliver that for you. So one of the most pleasing things is when a player tests a new product and says, this is better. I don't know why it's better, but it's better. And that's perfect. Like you don't need to know or care why it's better. Let us worry about that. That's our job. You go figure out how to win tournaments and trust that you got the best clubs in the industry. So effectively, we don't want them thinking too deeply about all the technology in there. We want them playing golf and doing what they do, and we want them to trust us.
What's in-house at Ping? What's the sort of feeling in terms of where can people continue to see improvement? Where are they kind of maybe still have the biggest opportunity to improve their handicaps with regards to equipment?
I think there's still gains to be had across the board.
Yeah.
I really do. I think there are certain areas like with putting, where really doing some stuff to link why do certain players genuinely putt better with one putter or another. And you know, I think buying a putter right now can be a pretty overwhelming experience for golfers. You know, we offer probably 25 different putters you can buy, and we're just one brand. So you know, you guys are selling all the brands. That's a lot of that's a lot of putter choice that people have. So trying to figure out how to narrow that down to based on your swing and the way you putt, and the things that are important to you and the feels you have and the psychology. How do we help narrow that down and give you confidence that the putter that looks good and feels good and works well for you in the lab is actually going to translate to putting better still 6 months down the line? Because it's pretty easy to convince yourself a putter's work great because you picked it up and it looked good and you hold 3 in a row. But you get out onto a real green and under pressure, and the mechanics of the putter are not really working for you, but you've been led to think that they were. So I think there's combining the human piece with the engineering piece is something that's really tricky. You know, we're a hard engineering type company. We're founded on mechanical engineering, on material science. We're really strong in those areas. I think there's some gains to be made trying to link that more with the psychology side of how does that play into a golfer. Our new putters with the flat face, I think, is a recognition of, you know what, I think we've underestimated how important the sound feedback is for certain players. Not everyone. Some players really actually don't want the putter to sound much at all.
Sure.
But a lot of players use that sound feedback a lot, whether they consciously throw it or not. So that's a human piece. That's not a hard engineering. That's a psycho. But
it's a good point.
But it ends up in real performance.
Yeah.
So how do we blend the moment of inertias and the center of masses with visual, the way your mind works, the way your ears interpret sound, that kind of stuff. So that's where I think we're focusing a lot of effort is, acoustics, visuals, how it actually translates to real performance. Not just what looks pretty, which is also important.
Sure.
But how does it really play into playing the best?
Yeah.
Acoustics is a big one because every time a new driver comes out, people go, "What does it sound like?"
Yeah.
Oh, does it sound like a tin can? Oh, does it sound like that tour strike that it should sound like all the time? And we get it asked all the time. We post videos on new drivers, and the first thing people say, it sounds much better than the previous model or whatever it is. So acoustics is the biggest.
Yeah, and it's a real emotional connection with the acoustics piece. It's hard to pin down because players use such wildly different language in terms of how they describe it. They'll have an opinion on whether it sounds good, but when you ask someone to really describe, you didn't like the sound of that, what didn't you like about it? Then the words they use don't necessarily match up with the physics of what's going on, and you have to be really careful picking through all that. So linking the people side with the actual engineering side of the sound is crucial.
With when you went from G400 to G410, and like you said, you knew you had such a golden product in G400, and obviously the acoustic engineering that went into that, there would have been some challenges obviously that came with making a product with effectively holes in it. So like ports where the weight was going around it. So, what sort of challenge did that provide to the team to try and retain as much of that great kind of acoustic engineering, but also have technology paired with that?
Yeah, it's hard with drivers, and I think to be honest, with all clubs with sound, that it's really difficult to truly simulate everything about the sound before you've made a prototype. So with a lot of our things, we can design something virtually in CAD. We can do all sorts of crash simulations and have really good predictability about how durable that product's going to be. We very rarely bring in prototypes that fail quickly these days because our simulations are so good in that area. We have great aerodynamic simulations. We've got a really good understanding of aerodynamically how efficient the club is going to be before we ever prototype it. Because prototyping takes time. Sound is really tough. We can get some idea from simulations, but to really truly have confidence that I know exactly how it's going to sound from the simulation is tough. So there's still a pretty big experimental piece to it. So you do what you can with simulation, you do what you can in the prototyping phase, and then you have to rely on your knowledge of how to fix little sound issues that come up. And so we actually still spend quite a bit of time on fine-tuning, dialing in the sound once we've gone through the prototyping process, which is, it's a pain and it's a lot of resources, but it's worth it, so we spend the time on it.
And it's got to be within a range, doesn't it? Because you've got so many variables that are involved, such as strike point changes acoustic, golf ball compression will change acoustic. So within that
different
range,
ball brands,
it's hard to always control that.
And even just the environment.
Absolutely.
So we'll test outside. If you're testing under a cover outside, it sounds different to if you're testing out in the open. Indoors again sounds different, but it depends on the shape of the room and how much echo there is. So there's an awful lot to it. And then players' tastes even change. The same player might describe a sound differently a couple of years later. So players' tastes change over time. It's a hard one to pin down.
Where's the opportunity let's say with the Metalwood? Where's the opportunity to keep going, in a progressive, sort of direction with that? What do we have left? Because they're pretty good right now.
Yeah, although, to be honest, I've been getting that question as long as I've been at Ping, and I've been at Ping since 2005.
Absolutely.
And, we had drivers in 2005 that could get to the USGA CT limit. We had drivers that were, really high moment of inertia, and I was getting that question then, is there really much to be had in drivers? And here we are in 2020, and I think everyone would agree drivers in 2020 are a lot better than they were in 2005 across the board. It's getting harder and harder to find big improvements. So we find a lot of our improvements by adding up small things. We call it incremental gains. That's a more well-known phrase in Britain, I think, with the success of the British cycling team and the incremental gains approach and how that's all worked. Over here people are less familiar with that term, but really what it means is taking everything we can think of about how to design a better driver and what would constitute performance on a golf course, and making a whole bunch of stuff 1% better, rather than making one thing 10% better. And
I love that. Yeah, I think the Dave Allred approach to that stuff is phenomenal.
Right, exactly. So that's a big part of where I think there's gains to be made. We're in a pretty good shape aerodynamically, but there's still some gains to be made. We can get almost all the way up to the moment of inertia limit now, but you could then say, well, now we could start maybe making smaller drivers that still hit the limit. There's still gains to be made. So they tend to come from materials, they tend to come from manufacturing technologies. Our designers have some ideas about what they would love to do if we just had the technology to catch up. So, I'd say, with at least the next 5 or 10 years, there's plenty more to be done, and then let's chat in 2030 and see where we are.
And that's it. I mean, I think there's a lot of chatter right now with regards to where the products are, where we were maybe not 05, but maybe 15, 16, 17. How far, better, or how much better are we now? How much have we advanced it? What are the buying cycles that people should be looking to address their equipment? Is it every year, every 3 years, 5 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I think you should probably get new equipment really quite frequently. But realistically, some of it depends how much you play, right? Sure. So a driver's not going to wear out, right? Your driver, unless you're putting some serious abuse on it, your driver's not going to wear, like a wedge. With enough play, those grooves will start to wear, and you will see a performance degradation, and you need to refresh those. So we recommend, particularly players that play a lot. They don't have to be good players, but players who play a lot probably look at getting fresh wedges, once a year, and the pros even more often because they put a lot of shots on them. I think with something like a driver, we see a lot of players maybe looking at sort of skipping one generation, and every sort of 2 to 3 years is probably a pretty good time to look at. That's 2 generations of drivers. That's twice as many innovations we've been able to pack in.
Sure.
But we feel confident that we can show every year that, or at least every kind of 18 months when we launch a new driver, we've got some genuine improvements. We've got some genuine reasons why it's worth trying. We're not expecting everyone to replace the driver every 18 months. That's a lot of money to spend on golf, but there'll be people out there that see the benefits. But if you're playing a 7, 8-year-old driver, you really should look at coming in, and there's a lot we've done in those intervening years to make it better and make golf easier for you.
For sure. Ping are one of the only companies, if not the only company, that's very involved in the shafts that go into your products. A lot of engineering and that stuff is designed in-house. Tell us a little bit about why you feel very strongly that should not be an outsourced component.
Basically because the whole thing's a system, right? You don't buy a golf club head or a shaft. By themselves, they're useless. You buy a golf club, right? And so it's a system. They interact with each other. The shaft influences, the head influences the shaft. They come together as a package, and the grip as well. So to us, it's very important. We have to be experts in the whole system. We need to be experts in shafts, and as experts in shafts, we feel like we can do a pretty good job of tuning the shaft, at least the stock shaft on our club, for the head it goes with. That said, we want to have plenty of options, so we have, I think, a pretty good hybrid model of having some of our own Ping design shafts working with the major shaft companies. I mean, often we're working with a Mitsubishi, we're working with a UST, someone like that to develop our shafts, but we'll have control of the design, and I think you get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I think while there's still a transition to be made. More people are being custom fit than ever before, but it's still a minority versus the way people buy off the shelf and that sort of thing. So I think it's a phenomenal thing that you guys appreciate that and make sure that the shaft isn't an afterthought. It has to work in that system in order to get the best performance for the person who maybe isn't being fit. And it might be a great option for the fitting as well, but at least you have other options. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think all we hope is that players keep an open mind and try a few shafts and just play the one that works best for them. There's some great aftermarket shafts out there. We absolutely know, the same shaft does not suit everyone, so we put a range out there and go try a few. There's no substitute for a little bit of trial and error with shafts, because it's a complicated business. I know a lot about shafts. I know you know a lot about shafts. It takes a very brave man to look at someone swing once and say, that is the shaft for them. It's a really complicated interaction. You're loading this thing and unloading it in 3D space. in a quarter of a second.
Yeah.
So there's a certain amount of trial and error really works with shafts.
Yeah, we always say that when it comes to shaft testing, you know, we're allowed to be wrong, and eventually right, you know. But it's that process of elimination. It's the problem solving that goes along the way with it.
Yeah, and at least we find for like an expert can really help guide you. Let's narrow this down to these 2 or 3 to try. Right out of the wall of shafts you see.
Yeah.
I'll help get us in the ballpark, and then we'll trial a few.
There's some sort of softwares and systems and the way sort of, you know, AI is being sort of somewhat integrated into golf now. Do you ever see a day where there's an elimination process that's sort of computer based for shafts and pattern recognition?
I think it'll get more and more prominent, and we've used some of that kind of approach, to supplement. But I think it supplements. Artificial intelligence is still only as good as the human intelligence that's programmed it, right? And so it's kind of a buzzword in the industry right now. It's basically using software tools in a sophisticated fashion is artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
We definitely do some of that already. Yeah. I think it'll continue to improve and evolve, but getting someone the perfect shaft is a very human interaction, and you don't know exactly how the human's going to respond to a new shaft. We've done some great research of having players hit different shafts, and some players pretty much swing the same no matter what you give them. Yeah. Other players adapt a lot based on the feedback they get from the shaft. And so that's a really tough one to pin down, even with AI, to really know for sure, when I put this shaft in someone's hands and they feel a difference at the start of the backswing, how's that going to impact the human part of the system?
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah. Wedges, when it comes to sort of, we've done some friction testing on the back of kind of know what you guys have been doing and hearing a little bit about the evolution of Hydropearl and kind of what that's been doing in-house at Ping. Talk to us a little bit about that and kind of what the philosophy was behind controlling conditions.
Yeah, it was cool when I saw your video. It reminded me of our visit out to you a couple of years ago, and we were chatting about, how do you, when you're indoors with wedges, how do you better match what's going on the course? And so it was really, nice to see you guys working on that. And I think that we've been trying to figure that out a lot ourselves. Wedge testing is really hard because it's not a one-trick pony. Sure. In a sense, driver testing is a little easier. Yeah. Roughly speaking, you're trying to do the same thing every time you step up on the tee and hit your drive, roughly. With a wedge, it's completely different. Every single time you pull the wedge out of the bag, you're doing something slightly different with it. And we know that the environment makes such a huge difference. So all the stuff we do with Hydropearl and grooves, it's all aimed at giving you predictable flight through a range of conditions on the course. In idealized conditions, if you're hitting off a tee or if you're hitting indoors off a mat, you don't need the grooves. You don't need the Hydropearl particularly. You're going to get functional spin pretty much whatever you do. In fact, that's the demo we brought today to the show. Is we brought some grooveless wedges and polished the face. So it's a Glide 3 with completely polished face. And you look at it, and even I look at it and think, am I really going to be able to spin this? And I know the physics. But when it's dry, you just get enough grip from, just from the surface contact. And you can spin that thing, not quite as much as a grooved wedge, but pretty close.
Pretty close.
We were doing some 75-yard shots, getting like 8,500 spin maybe with the grooves and sort of 7,800 spin without the grooves, with a polished face. But as soon as you spritz a tiny little bit of water in there, which just gives you a little bit of a simulation of a little bit of rough, a little bit of dew, a little bit of golf course, right? Golf courses have water. Grass is mostly water. Unless you're playing on an absolutely bone-dry golf course, there's almost always some level of moisture that gets in. Just the wedge brushing the ground actually throws a little bit of water up in there. So there's always a tiny bit of moisture in there. So having like a spritz of a water bottle just helps simulate a little bit more what the golf course is throwing at you. And that's when you see the benefit of the grooves and the benefit of the face patterns we have and the hydrophobic stuff. So, that was what the idea of the demo is, to get players thinking about that a little more. Like, if you just go into a simulator bay at your local store and just hit some wedges, they're all going to spin fine.
It's a fairly level playing field.
They're all going to spin fine. And in fact, if anything, you know, the better grooves, you might not see an improvement at all.
Yeah.
But as soon as you put some media in there, some
Sure.
water, some grass, whatever, then now you're starting to see the reality. So
Yeah.
it was cool to see you guys doing that demo. We really feel like it's a very impactful demo in terms of showcasing the technology, but B, educating people about when do the grooves and the face patterns really make a difference.
Yeah. I think that when you tell people that you can spin a grooveless wedge about as much as a grooved wedge, people will scratch their head and go, well, I always thought the grooves and the sharpness of the edges and how many there are in the pattern, and that was what creates the spin. That's what creates the friction, but it's just, you know,
it's almost true.
Yeah.
That's what creates the spin when you don't have like nice dry conditions and enough bite just from the surface contact. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, Paul, appreciate your time. We could go on for hours and hours debating the whole industry and equipment and where it's all going, but we really do appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Well.
Cheers. Thanks.